On August 21st, 1989, 17-year-old Norman Charles Ladner Jr. left his family's country store near Picayune, Mississippi, to go hunting on their 122-acre property. This was a routine activity for this outdoors-loving high school senior, who had already developed into an accomplished woodsman. When he failed to return by his usual time of 7 o'clock, his parents, Norman Sr. and Charlotte, grew concerned. His dad initiated a search and tragically discovered Norman's lifeless body in the woods with a single shot to his head. The initial investigation by the Pearl River County Sheriff suggested the possibility of an accidental death, theorizing that Norman might have fallen from a tree, causing his weapon to discharge. However, the coroner later ruled the death a self-deletion, citing a close contact wound entering the right temple and exiting the left. This conclusion was met with skepticism by Norman's family, who asserted that he exhibited no signs of depression and was, in fact, a happy and outgoing teenager. Doubts about this ruling were further fueled by several inconsistencies. Norman's wallet, containing $140, was missing from the scene. And trust me when I say it, this is going to be by far the least suspicious thing. Additionally, he had a laceration on the crown of his head, which authorities attributed to a fall onto a jagged tree root. The Ladners contested this explanation, arguing that the location of the wound was inconsistent with such a fall. Taking matters into their own hands, Norman's parents conducted their own investigation. They meticulously sifted through the soil where their son had been found and discovered a bullet embedded 2 inches into the ground. This bullet was longer than those used in Norman's rifle, raising questions about the weapon involved. When they presented this evidence to the sheriff, he dismissed it, maintaining that Norman had been standing, which would have made it impossible for the bullet to be found beneath his head. And yeah, that's the point, Sheriff. It would have been impossible for the bullet to have been found where it was. Perhaps time to reconsider your theory of the case. The Ladners' quest for answers led to even more unsettling discoveries. Approximately 300 yards from where Norman's body was found, his father uncovered a homemade radio-like device hanging in a tree. A former DEA agent identified it as a tool used by dealers to signal aircraft for substance drops. This revelation led the family to theorize that Norman might have inadvertently stumbled upon illicit activities on their property and was slain to eliminate him as a potential witness. Their suspicions were further heightened when Charlotte was approached by an unknown man at the coroner's office. He warned her against reopening the case, ominously suggesting that pursuing the matter could endanger her other children. The official stance remained that Norman's death was a self-deletion, and the case was closed without further investigation. The family's discoveries, the mismatched bullet, the missing wallet, the potentially unexplained head injury, the signaling device, and the anonymous threat were all ignored by authorities. This lack of thorough investigation and the swift conclusion of self-deletion have led to widespread speculation about a possible cover-up. Some have theorized that local law enforcement may have been complicit in illicit activities. Others have speculated that the local authorities just didn't have the necessary competencies to investigate the case meaningfully. Anyway, I'm just going to come out and say it. The only rational explanation for this case is extremely serious corruption, and Norman Ladner definitely didn't end himself. I hope one day his family gets the justice they deserve, but given the quote-unquote investigation that took place, I have my doubts. Also, this really drives home the dangers of corruption of this nature. All it takes is one compromised individual in the police department to totally botch an investigation permanently. In the early 1930s, naturalist William Beebe embarked on pioneering deep-sea explorations off the coast of Bermuda. He descended into the ocean's depths in a spherical submersible known as the bathysphere, and became one of the first people to observe deep sea life firsthand. On September 22, 1932, during one of these dives, Beebe reported observing a remarkable creature at a depth of 2,100 feet, which he named the giant dragonfish. Beebe described the giant dragonfish as approximately 6 feet long, with a body resembling that of a barracuda. Its most striking feature was its bioluminescence. He noted, strong lights, pale bluish, were strung down the body. Additionally, the fish possessed 2 long tentacles hanging from its body, each tipped with luminous organs, one reddish, the other blue, that twitched and jerked beneath the fish. Beebe observed that one tentacle arose from the chin area, while the other was located near the tail. At the time of Beebe's observation, the largest known dragonfish species reached lengths of up to 15 inches. In contrast, the giant dragonfish he reported was significantly larger, measuring about 6 feet in length. This disparity in size led to skepticism within the scientific community, as no physical specimens or other evidence of such a large dragonfish had been obtained. Beebe's observations were documented through detailed descriptions and illustrations by artist Elsa Bostelmann, who translated his verbal accounts into visual representations. Also, if you're one of those people who just listens to my videos, this might be one of the times you want to look at the screen. Despite the intrigue surrounding Beebe's sighting, the existence of the giant dragonfish remains unconfirmed. Modern deep-sea explorations have yet to encounter a dragonfish matching Beebe's description. The largest known species today is the obese dragonfish, which attains a maximum length of about 2 feet, significantly smaller than the 6-footer reported by Beebe. Several factors could account for the absence of corroborating evidence for Beebe's giant dragonfish. The technology of the early 20th century limited deep-sea exploration capabilities, and the bathysphere lacked photographic equipment, relying solely on human observation. Additionally, deep-sea environments are vast and largely unexplored, leaving open the possibility that such a species could exist undetected. However, without physical evidence, the scientific community remains extremely cautious about the existence of this creature. So this is one of the few cryptid-type creatures I've profiled that I believe has a significant possibility of actually being something more than an urban legend or a misidentified animal. Deep-sea environments are challenging to explore, leaving room for fairly large elusive creatures to thrive undetected. Bioluminescent adaptations, like those described by Beebe, are common in the abyssal ocean, supporting the plausibility of such traits in a hypothetical dragonfish. Adding to the credibility of the report, Beebe had no way of knowing that bioluminescence was a common undersea adaptation at the time of the sighting in 1932. Additionally, gigantism is a known phenomenon in deep-sea creatures where species grow larger due to a variety of reasons which aren't fully understood. Or hey, maybe since he was one of the first ones down there, he just flat out started making up fantastical sightings for scientific clout. And if that was his goal, here I am almost 100 years later, talking about his fish fantasy. On April 16, 2003, Air Force Colonel Philip Shue, a respected psychiatrist stationed at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, died under circumstances that continue to perplex investigators. The initial appearance of a tragic car accident quickly unraveled into a complex web of mystery, leading to debates over whether his demise was self-inflicted or not. Born on July 22, 1948 in Brookville, Ohio, Philip Shue had a distinguished military career. He joined the United States Air Force in 1970, serving as a navigator before pursuing medical training to become a psychiatrist. And just so everyone here is clear, he was a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, so he had completed medical school before specializing. And trust me, this will potentially be important later on. In 1993, he married Tracy, an Air Force nurse, and by 2003, they were planning his retirement and a move to Alabama. On the morning of April 16, 2003, Colonel Shu left his home in Bourne, Texas, around 5:30 a.m., heading to work at Lackland Air Force Base. Approximately 2.5 hours later, his vehicle was observed driving erratically on Interstate 10 before veering off the road and crashing into a grove of trees. First responders found Shu deceased in the driver's seat, but the scene presented alarming anomalies. Duct tape was found around his wrists and ankles, his nipples had been surgically removed, a deep gash extended from his chest to his navel, and the tip of his left pinky finger was missing. The bizarre nature of Shu's injuries led to multiple investigations by local and state police, as well as the Air Force. After a year-long inquiry, these agencies concluded that Shu had suffered a psychological breakdown, inflicted his injuries, and ultimately deleted himself by intentionally crashing his car. This conclusion was supported by the local medical examiner, who noted the presence of lidocaine in Shu's system, suggesting he had numbed himself to perform the surgery. However, this self-deletion ruling was met with significant skepticism by many of those closest with him. Shu's widow, Tracy, vehemently disputed the findings, asserting that her husband had no history of mental illness that would lead to such actions. She highlighted their plans for the future, including purchasing a new home, as evidence of his positive state of mind. Additionally, colleagues and friends described Shu as mild-mannered and passionate about life, which some argues further casts doubt on this theory. Several significant factors complicated the narrative surrounding his demise. Shu had previously received anonymous threatening letters, one of which warned that his ex-wife, Nancy, and her new husband were plotting to have him eliminated to collect on life insurance policies. Notably, there was no evidence provided to support these allegations, and the source of the letter was unknown. During their divorce, Nancy had obtained 2 life insurance policies on Shu totaling $1 million, which she refused to cancel despite his repeated requests. Shu had expressed concerns about these policies, fearing for his safety. He had even attempted to reach out to the life insurance company to have the policies canceled, but was advised that he couldn't do so unilaterally. Now, there's a major factor to keep in mind here. Shu and Nancy had at least one child, and as such, her maintaining a life insurance policy on him wasn't necessarily unusual at all. Others have pointed to the 2.5-hour gap between Shu's departure from home and the crash. This time gap is presently unaccounted for. This has led to speculation that he may have been abducted and operated on during this period. Further, the precise and deliberate nature of his injuries, such as the surgical removal of his nipples and the clean chest incision, suggested the possibility of external infliction. However, those who support the idea that Shu committed the act himself note that he was a medical doctor, and even as a psychiatrist, he had received surgical training. Unconvinced by the official ruling, Tracy pursued legal action to have her husband's death reclassified as a non-consensual elimination. She enlisted the expertise of Dr. Cyril Wecht, a renowned forensic pathologist who's made a few appearances in this series, who conducted a second autopsy. Dr. Wecht criticized the "he did it himself" conclusion, pointing out likely insufficient levels of lidocaine to achieve the necessary anesthesia for such acts. He posited that the injuries were more consistent with an act inflicted by another party. In 2008, during a legal proceeding involving the insurance company, Texas Judge Bill Palmer ruled that Colonel Shu's death was indeed a slaying. Some sources lean on this very heavily as lending official legal approval to this idea, which isn't quite accurate, at least not in a criminal context. This case was in the context of a civil lawsuit which doesn't bind anything in a potential criminal context. It's also important to remember that a finding of self-deletion would mean the insurance company doesn't have to pay the beneficiaries of the policy. Thus, the finding against the insurer that Shu didn't delete of his own accord meant that the beneficiary, Nancy, received the stated payout. Further yet, it's important to remember that the standard of proof is much lower in a civil context than in a criminal context. In a civil case, the plaintiff only has to prove it was an elimination on a balance of probabilities. That is to say, just a hair over 50%. In a criminal case, the prosecution has to prove something much more difficult, beyond a reasonable doubt. Despite the civil ruling, local authorities and the Air Force did not amend the official cause of death, maintaining that Shu did it himself. This discrepancy led to ongoing disputes and calls for further investigation. In the end, there's been no evidence whatsoever to suggest that there was any involvement by Shu's ex-wife. Some believe that Shu himself, having undergone some sort of psychological break, set up the entire process to look as though his ex-wife was involved. Big shout out to a subscriber who goes by Darren for this excellent suggestion. If you have a suggestion for this series, make sure to drop it in the comments section below or join up on the official Discord channel. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here. Hope you're enjoying part 109 of this series. If you enjoy my content, I've got a small favor to ask you. Hit the share button and send this video to 2 of your friends. Now, let's get back to business. On November 6, 1976, in Rome, New York, 59-year-old businessman Stanley Edward Gryzak was tragically slain during a home invasion that remains unsolved to this day. Stanley and his wife Esther owned a gas station and liquor store adjacent to their residence. That night, 2 masked intruders broke into their home, assaulted the couple, and shot Stanley. Stanley and Esther had been operating their gas station and liquor store since 1957. Stanley managed the liquor store while his brothers Peter and Bernard ran the gas station. Their home, attached to these businesses, was a modest house where they lived a seemingly peaceful life. However, beneath this veneer of normalcy, there were undercurrents of tension, particularly concerning Stanley's brother Peter, who owned a local bar with a questionable reputation. On that fateful evening, Esther was performing her usual routine of checking the doors and windows before bed. Suddenly, 2 men wearing ski masks forced their way into the house. They tied her up and began ransacking the home, searching for something unknown. Upstairs, Stanley was preparing a bath for Esther and didn't initially clue into what was going on. Hearing the commotion, he rushed downstairs and confronted the intruders. A struggle ensued, during which Stanley was eliminated. The assailants continued to search the house for over 2 hours before fleeing, taking only 2 bottles of beer. Their 6-year-old grandson, asleep in another bedroom, was thankfully left physically unharmed. The initial police investigation was marred by oversights, which I feel is a running theme in unsolved slaying cases. The official autopsy reported that Stanley had perished from a single stab wound to the heart. However, this conclusion was contradicted when Stanley's son, Martin, discovered a shell casing on the dining room floor the day after the event, an item the police had missed. This discovery prompted a second autopsy, which revealed that Stanley had been shot, not stabbed. This discrepancy raised suspicions of a possible cover-up, or, at the very least, gross negligence on the part of the initial investigators. And I just have to say here, I'm no medical expert, but shouldn't these wounds look different enough that an actual medical expert can tell the difference? Seriously, if you have this expertise, let me know in the comments. In 1989, a new lead emerged when an informant, who was an admitted substance dealer and general small-time criminal, came forward. He claimed that a few days before the slaying, he had been approached by a man associated with a local bar who asked him to burglarize the Gryzak home. According to the street pharmacist, the man believed there was an extremely large sum of money hidden there. This information led investigators to re-examine the case, uncovering witnesses who had seen suspicious individuals near the Grizek residence around the time of the event. Composite sketches were put together, which I've put up on your screen, but I've got to question the accuracy of them given they were made 13 years after fleeting sightings. Notably, a neighbor, Amy Scott, reported seeing a man walking toward the Grizek home on the night of the slaying, and later observed him leaving in a white Lincoln Continental. Additionally, bookstore owner Patsy Peck recalled two men matching the suspect's descriptions visiting her store the day before the event. Further investigation revealed that the bar where the informant worked had its liquor license revoked in 1982 due to on-site gambling and illegal selling of controlled substances. This bar was previously owned by Stanley's brother, Peter. Stanley's family speculated that his slaying might have been connected to illegal activities at the bar. However, despite these leads, the case still remains unresolved with no publicly known suspects or persons of interest. Nordic aliens are a prominent feature in UFO lore and extraterrestrial encounter narratives. Described as tall, fair-skinned beings with blonde hair and blue eyes, they closely resemble the stereotypical image of Scandinavian individuals, which is why they're dubbed Nordic. These entities are typically portrayed as benevolent, spiritually advanced, and deeply concerned about humanity's welfare and the Earth's ecological balance. Nordic aliens are commonly depicted as standing between 6 to 7 feet tall, with long blonde or reddish hair, blue or green eyes, and fair skin. Some accounts suggest they possess larger than average foreheads and are predominantly male. Their attire is often described as tailored clothing, which adds to their ethereal and graceful presence. Basically, imagine elves from the Lord of the Rings, and you've got yourself a Nordic alien. Their human-like appearance is said to allow them to blend seamlessly into human society when they choose to visit Earth. Believers often associate Nordic aliens with the Pleiades star cluster, a group of stars located about 400 light-years from Earth. This association has led to the alternative name Pleiadians. Some narratives also link them to Venus, referring to them as Venusians. These origin stories suggest that Nordics come from advanced civilizations with a deep interest in guiding and observing humanity. Nordic aliens are often described as communicating telepathically, conveying messages of peace, love, and spiritual growth. They're perceived as protectors or guardians, aiming to assist humanity in overcoming its challenges. Many contactees report receiving channeled messages from Nordics, emphasizing ecological responsibility and the dangers of nuclear weapons and pollution. The 1950s saw a surge in reports from individuals claiming to have encountered Nordic aliens. One of the most notable figures is George Adamski, a Polish-American author who claimed to have met with Nordic aliens and even taken flights with them to other planets. In his books, Adamski detailed his alleged experiences and the messages he received from these beings. Another prominent account is that of Travis Walton, an American forestry worker who claimed to have been abducted by a UFO in 1975. Walton reported encountering humanoid beings with Nordic features aboard the spacecraft. His experiences were later documented in his book, which inspired the Hollywood film Fire in the Sky. I've never seen it, but it's got pretty decent audience reviews, and I always like a good alien flick, so I may check it out. The imagery of Nordic aliens has permeated various aspects of popular culture, influencing literature, films, and the broader UFO subculture. Their human-like appearance and benevolent demeanor contrast sharply with the more commonly depicted gray aliens, who are often portrayed as emotionless or malevolent. Notably, some tellings of the Nordic alien narrative portray them as living amongst us, but in a benevolent capacity, unlike those sinister reptile people you're always hearing about. The Alula whale, sometimes referred to as the Alula dolphin, is a cryptid reported primarily in the Indian Ocean. First described by Captain Bruins in his 1971 Field Guide of Whales and Dolphins, this elusive creature has intrigued marine enthusiasts and cryptozoologists alike. According to Bruins, the Alula whale bears a resemblance to the well-known orca, but with notable differences. It's described as having a brown coloration and adorned with white star-like scars across its body. Its forehead is rounded, akin to that of a pilot whale, though not as pronounced, and it possesses a small snout. The dorsal fin is notably prominent, rising approximately 2 feet above the body. These whales are estimated to reach lengths of about 20 feet according to Bruins. Bruins reported observing these whales in pods ranging from 4 to 8 individuals, with 6 being the average group size. Sightings were primarily in the deep coastal waters of the eastern Gulf of Aden during the summer months. In addition to the Bruins accounts, there have been other reported sightings. In 1987, a naval crewman observed a dark brown whale with a prominent dorsal fin in the Indian Ocean during a passage from Fremantle to Suez. The whale was seen swimming just below the surface, approximately 100 meters ahead of the ship. As the vessel approached, the creature dove deep and disappeared. While a positive identification was not possible, the prominent dorsal fin and dark brown coloring led to speculation that it might have been an Alula whale. Despite these intriguing reports, the scientific community remains extremely skeptical about the existence of the Alula whale as a distinct species. Some experts suggest that the sightings could be attributed to color variations or mutations within known species, such as the orca. The lack of physical evidence, such as specimens or clear photographs, makes it challenging to confirm the Alula whale's existence. Okay, so anyone who's watched my content for a while now knows I love whale and dolphin cryptids, and I want to believe in them all, but I've got some problems with this one. A few rumored glimpses in the Indian Ocean don't amount to proof, especially without a single decent photograph or physical specimen. If there were truly a distinct Alula whale, and if it truly did live in pods like orcas, and given that it lives in a highly trafficked part of the ocean, we would have had confirmation by now. Or maybe not, and I just need to keep more of an open mind about large oceanic cryptids.